just doing that. I was just having so much fun.
I should also remind the audience, those who were there, and inform the others who were not there, that after 3 minutes of listening to Jugal talk about his book, a certain young student sent me a message on the then infant WhatsApp to ask if Jugal was single. I refused to answer the question. So then, when
You were protecting my privacy. You are just like the government.
So when he finished reading from his book, this irrepressible young girl, at the point where the host said, "Any questions?" she stood up and said, "Are you single?" At which point, Jugal turned only 2 shades of different colors and then answered the question. Right. So, Jugal, it's a massive pleasure to have you with us. It's even more of a pleasure to have you read from your distinctive and superbly irreverent fiction and to share it with us. So we are extremely privileged because we just heard that this is the first event you're doing with the book.
Yes.
Right? It's a meta feeling, and it's superb to have you here with us 10 years after the first time.
Yeah, I'm just super glad. I'm just feeling amazing. Like somebody talk about my writing in this way because it's been so long since anybody said, "Oh, you're writing." I was like, "What writing? I make reels, bro." So, okay. Yeah.
Superb to have you here. I'll hand you over to Nikita, who will be in conversation with you. Thanks once again for joining us.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
I think we will start with a reading from your book.
Okay.
And I've actually picked a chapter that I want to read out for us.
Tell me which one.
I remember when I started reading the book, initially I was very happy and having a nice time, and I was thinking, haha, what a funny book. I can't believe someone's gone and written a book about all things tutty and turd related. And I also found it incredibly wonderful that almost a day after I started reading this book, I had like decent amounts of loose motion happen to me. So I just felt like it was like,
by the power of the book.
The power of the book.
I bless you. Go on. Yeah.
But at some point I reached chapter 6, and I felt like I was forced to see that this book was not just spectacularly funny, but also like at certain points very spectacularly sad, and like I don't know if I felt quite sad at some bits. So I was hoping you could read us parts of chapter 3 or all of it if you.
3 or 6? Which one did you say?
6.
6. Huh.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just pull up 6. 4, 5, 6. Oh no, I had 8 marked. Let's see now what I remember of chapter 6. Okay. Nikunj did not know where to begin his job search. Gups asked if he wanted to sit at the shop owned by her family. If Nikunj wished to sit at shops, it would become a big hoo-ha in his family, for he had refused to work at his uncle's farsan shop. Avirite bijani dukan thodi besai. Friend ho to shu thai. That's not how, like, is this, let me just do a rough translation for you, which would be, this is not how you just go around sitting at other people's shops. You know, we have our own relatives around here. And so what if that person is your best friend? And that to a wine shop. Hashtag log kya kahenge. So Nikunj thanked Gups and told her if nothing worked out, he would call in that favor. He also spoke to other friends who had started working as salespeople for banks. Their jobs were to stand outside ATMs in the waiting areas of bank offices, at the bank booths in malls, and sell cards, loans, and other bank schemes. They said that they would definitely be able to wrangle him an interview, but the banks always preferred people from commerce background. None of the available jobs called out to Nikunj. To top that, there was also the fear of failure. This was the first grown-up thing that his family expected him to do, and he had to get it right. Nikita had started helping when she was in school by assisting Elabain with the tiffin cooking and running the house. This anxiety made Nikunj clumsy at the one job he already had. One time he forgot to scrub Vipul Bhai's back with soap. Another time, he forgot to help Vipulbhai wash his mouth after lunch. With each mistake, his self-esteem plummeted and he started wallowing in self-pity. And when he was in the deepest trenches of this self-pity, to feel better about himself, he decided that he was the light bearer of the household's financial responsibility. This happened when Nikunj was helping Vipulbhai bathe. He picked the one household expense he didn't like and let Vipulbhai have it. You know how worried I and Didi are about money right now? Why are you wasting money on that dhongi Dr. Garodia? He demanded. It didn't go as he had thought if it would. By challenging Dr. Garodia's integrity, he had put his hand in a sleeping snake's hole. Vipulbhai lashed out in the form of a lecture about Nikunj's unemployment. Hearing his own paranoia out loud sent his father, from his father, only served to batter his ego further. So he left a wet and naked Vipulbhai in the bathroom and went out for a smoke. There was no one else at home that morning. Ilaben had gone to the market and Shardaben was making chapatis for the lunch boxes in her own kitchen that day. When Nikunj returned, he found a shrunken Vipulbhai sobbing in the bathroom. That night, when Ilaben slapped Nikunj for doing what he did to Vipulbhai, he broke down. He did not offer any defense for his actions and he did not stop her as she continued shouting and slapping him. Nikita jumped between Ilaben and Nikunj, sat a crying Ilaben down and asked Nikunj to get her some water. Later that night, Nikunj sat at Vipulbhai's feet and apologized for his cruelty. With some difficulty, Vipulbhai placed a dead hand on the back of his neck and shed 2 solitary tears, one from each eye. Nikita made tea for everyone. Shardaben WhatsApped Ilaben to ask if she was okay. Everybody on their floor had heard Ilaben scream at Nikunj. This had surprised them. Every household on the floor had had raucous fights, but no one had ever heard a raised voice come out of the Golte Butala household. Yeah, I think this is what you meant.
Yes, but you also mentioned that you'd bookmarked chapter
Yeah,
8.
no. I know I had bookmarked general plot points, but I think I'm liking this version better. I'm getting to
Okay.
see a different side of the book myself by listening to you guys. So yeah, please, Nikita. Well done.
Okay, thank you for
Thanks.
reading out loud to us. I
Ah.
have a few questions before I open it up to the audience.
Hmm.
My first question is, when I was reading this book, I was constantly reminded of seeing a lot of tweets during the pandemic about, I mean, journalists were reaching out and asking people if they were caregivers and if they would talk to them, and they were writing essays about being caregivers. And um, at a certain point, I realized that this book was also about a caregiver in some ways. But what was more interesting to me was how it focused on somebody who's being cared for, and or an older person in the house whose uh, dignity is sometimes at stake, or all kinds of things for all kinds of things, this older person is at the mercy of his children. And there's a certain point in the story where Nikunj has to, along with another young man, has to administer an enema. Uh, and he tells the old man that, come on, help us help you. So I just wanted to know how you arrived at this, writing a book about a Tati Raja, but also making it a book about people who are caregivers and people who are at the receiving end of that caregiving. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Um, long story or short story is the question. I'm just trying to figure it out. So basically, let me just start off by this thing. I was in the middle of a meltdown, like full on schizoaffective disorder meltdown. So I was in the middle of that. I packed up my. I was staying in Bangalore then. I packed up my house and my social life, and I moved back home with my parents. There was a lot of uh, what do you call it, cathartic reunion in progress and everything else along with that meltdown and all of that. And then and at some point, I ended up meeting my mother's best friend, and she said, I read your first book. I was like, oh, thank you. Like, because, okay, this woman is the person responsible for me becoming a reader. She used to work with Macmillan at one point, like when I was like 2 year old or something. And she would keep bringing these amazing books. And that's what made me a reader, make me like language, English, all of that came from her. And so when I ended up meeting her, this is Sumitra auntie, if she's hello to her anyways in life. But yeah, so she ended up subtitling, and she gave me this like snarky look, like in the middle of a meltdown, which is like, nobody understands mental health so much in that generation. For them, it's a lot like, and plus when you are schizoaffective, reality is warped, so you're talking something else. So she ended up looking at me and she was like, uh, I read your first book. It's you strayed too far uh, from the community, the family, and all of that. Like, and it read like you've run too far away and you need to come back, and all of that. And I was like, okay, that sounds like a fair assessment. So let's do something about this. But yeah, no, it's about. So I was also at that time I was working on another novel draft, which was about designer drug selling college chemical engineer PhD student, and the two boys that she's in love with. So that was the novel I was working on, which is there is a draft of it somewhere, but it got rejected by my agent. But yeah, the next one. So then I was just like figuring out what else to do, because when you are just healing, you're not doing anything else. You're just sitting at home. You can't even watch like TV properly sometimes. But anyways, for me, writing has always been a lot about healing. So coming back to this thing, so yeah, I ended up trying to go back into the stories of my life, like the people I know. Like for example, I also wanted to write something that like that. That my parents would want to read this time. Like, because I was in this way of that, no, I need to connect with them somewhere. Like, we need to be on this ground, because this whole right wing and whatever wing I am, and like all of those things just kept going back and forth a lot in the middle of everything else. So I needed to write a story that worked for everybody around me at that point in there. And that just ended me like, so the part, all most of these parts come from conversations around that time with my dad, getting to know him, my mom, the community, also some stories from growing up. So my dad's disabled, he's like biplegic. So the stories from our childhood and stories from this and that, and so my dad's peer network of other disability people on WhatsApp and the whole thing. So like a lot of things came from like all these stories came together to form this the head fake that I was trying with the Tati came from there essentially, which is like, no, this has to be a story about a lot more than just poop, because how many poop jokes can you make at the end of the day? So
Speaking of parents, I was wondering how your parents, if they read the book and how they reacted to it, because usually when I write things and I show it to my parents, they either send me clapping emojis and they don't read it, or my mother reads it and tells me in Malayalam that I should try and write in English that people will understand. So how do you
that used to be a constant thing with my mom before this. She hasn't read this. Nobody in my family has read this book for some strange reason. I think just having the first one, they all read very happily because I wasn't around. So, so they all read it very happily. They asked questions. They made me narrate the whole story again, and the exact same feedback that you had, saying, "Please write in like English that I understand." So it also came from, so she would follow me on Facebook also and see my posts or something else, something like that I had written. And every now and then she would say, okay, I get the individual words. They make sense. But what are you actually trying to say in the whole thing? So I think it comes down to references and the language that we use. Sometimes we just use a turn of phrase that they just don't know. And ours comes from all kinds of Hajar pop culture consumption and 1500 other things. So yeah, and look, whatever lingo we develop with our friends, and our SMSEs creeps into our everyday talking and all of that. So things just become a little difficult, I guess, for them. So yeah, with this one, I did want to write, but unfortunately, nobody's read it. So yes.
You actually sort of led me directly to my next question.
I'm a good guest.
Where I noticed a lot of pop culture references, or like you talking about uh, Nikunj's girlfriend making TikToks and sending it to him, and them talking through TikToks, or the two of them watching Korean dramas together, and small things like that, which a lot of things that happen in the world around us. Sometimes when I write, for me to bring things from the present into my writing, I find very awkward because I feel like TikTok is like very popular now. What if like 2 years later people just don't know what, I don't know. I have these strange ideas in my head, but how is it that you are able to incorporate TikTok and K dramas and other things like so in like ways that seem so seamless? Because it, for me to do that in writing is very awkward. So
That's a it's stumping me a little. Mostly, okay, let me come to this. I write to promote the pop culture I like. Let me just be flat about it. There is no two ways about it. For me, it's the other way around, which is I'm writing to capture the pop culture universe we are living in this moment. You know, like the one version of this universe that this is a very recent thing that I deeply miss is the millennial doom space. I don't know how old you were then, but there was this entire thing between the late 2000 or the noughts or the noughties or whatever they're calling it these days. So in basically 2005 to late like 2011, 12. I think 2014 is when everything went to shit. But yeah, till then there was that entire millennial doom pop. Like the entire anthem for that could be Nicki Minaj's Starships, which is just like noise if you listen to it, but at the same point, it's such a fucking banger. I'm sorry, but yes, but yeah, point being, yeah. So for me, for me, I was so obsessed with that space, the comedy from then, the pop culture from then. I had ended up like the previous novel, which was rejected by my agent, but I did end up putting it up on Medium in the pandemic. Was called These People Are Mad. It's about 6 friends on New Year's Eve, and it is just pop culture. It's just like one of those mumblecore novels that just people are just talking and talking as things go unfold. So about this reference and that reference and all of that. So with this one, it was fairly simple. Also, pop culture kind of defines us. As much as people like to say, "Oh no, we are not dating bands, brands, and whatever." No, man, we all are. Please, let's just be really in one way or the other. So yeah,
so
so for me, I'm really obsessed about if I meet a person, I need to know what are their pop culture preference. What do they do? Like when they need to like kick it times in life. What do they watch? What do they listen to? Like, so their pop culture tastes have always been my obsession. I can't handle if somebody walks up to me and says I only do serious things. I was like, screw you.
so do you like, I like the book has a lot of uh WhatsApp forward type things and hashtags, and I like very distinctly remember this uh little soap ad meme that you've included in one of like the earlier
yeah,
chapters,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think.
yeah.
Like, did you like go about collecting these, or did you already have them ready when you were writing the book?
No, I made this up as I was going along. So I
You
just
made it up.
with that little thing, I just wanted to capture the journey of a meme, right? Where from when it starts till it stops being funny at some point when somebody just starts doing banal shit with it, like at the end. So I wanted to capture that with there. At the
Hmm.
same point, I was also trying to capture what happens in this. There's this particular offbeat influencer who nobody from the mainstream media will cover. People may not admit to following, but they all have that particular cult scene going. Like if you look at their followers, it's like fucking millions. But then uske baad, like nobody's really talking about it. Where is this coming from? Who are these people? But yeah, they do have like amazing engagement and this thing. So, and at the same point, there is this particular obsessive nature of fans starting groups about them and all of that. So I wanted to, with that little thing, it was just a build-up of that universe that Femida inhabits, right? Which is like a completely parallel universe where it's not even, it's like parallel to the parallel Instawala universe in there. So yeah, so I just wanted to do that, which is like very specific, costume-driven, musical, real trends that
So
become memes
even
by
like
fan clubs.
even the TikTok challenges, they were all made up because at
Yeah.
certain points I was like, okay, maybe I'm not part of this side of the internet because I feel like this is something that has actually happened.
No, I just wanted to make stuff up again to showcase my own pop culture love. So I've just done things which I would enjoy though with that. That is
I think a lot of our participants are raising their hands, but before we go to them, I have one final question for you.
Done.
Um, Another thing that I noticed while reading this book is that while Nikunj cares for his dad,
Hmm.
a lot of the things that he does, taking care of him, washing him, bathing him, and just seeing him in like one full vulnerable state.
Hmm.
Um, the only people I could remember or like recall are all the women in my life, because
Hmm.
at least in my family, when it comes to taking care of an older person or someone who's like this close to dying, it's always the women who take initiative. Sometimes it's like the daughter-in-law who goes in and does everything that's required, because everyone else is somehow deeply not very comfortable with doing some things that
Yeah. Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
So, but I noticed that in this book, it's like most of it is Nikunj, which I found very curious, because I've never at least where like when I'm growing up, I've never seen any boys or men in my family like ever enter rooms with sick people and take care of them or do things for them. So how can you talk to me about how that happened?
Hmm. That was just I was just writing a story about a caregiver in there. And there. As much as it was also my own like journey in a way of having seen people take care of each other. Like there's this thing with hospitals and my family. And there was this middle space in our my growing up years where I was always treated like me and my brother, both of us, like you're the male child. You're not supposed to do any of this in there. And so we were like, "Nahi, nahi, aap aage badho." Like that was the entire message of the family, which is like, "No, we will manage with our entire thing. You guys study and then take the like be the saviors of the family by making more money or whatever." But that was always the space. So in that noise, that one time that I think my mom asked me to like help out at some point, I just had flipped it off and I didn't remember this.
Hmm.
So when this was like, so at some point I was like very seriously taking over responsibility, learning new things through the whole thing. And yeah, so I was just like, "नहीं, ये करना पड़ेगा." मतलब at some point this has to be a story, and at some point or the other I was also in this weird space where I was like, we should be writing stories about what kind of world we want to live in, as opposed to like the world that already exists, and we are anyways drowning in anxiety and darkness when it comes to content, like at least in the streaming space and the kind of other kind of stories that are all around in some way or the other. So for me it's always writing has always been about writing a world that we'd rather be in there. So if the women were working and they were killing it at what they were doing, then obviously the responsibility had to be the guys, and that literally was the case in my house at that point. My mom was busy working. My brother, I don't have a cousin, but my cousin at the same point. So I have a female cousin. I don't know, cousiness, but yeah, I have one of those who was really close to me when I was healing around that time, and she was also like killing it in her career and everything. And she was having a different fight at her house, which was like about, no, I want to be this career person. I want to be that suit wearing person who takes over the world, and all of that happening at the same time. So and my mom is also has been the like a major bread earner in my family through our growing up years because of dad's disability at some point or the other. So yeah, so it was just like, no, this is probably the world it should be. This guy is just sitting here doing nothing, barely finishing his BA, and he better be like shaping up. And so yeah, it came from there. Yeah. So me at that point in a meltdown, while I was healing, I needed to have contribute as well as like not feel like shit and all of that, right? So then I decided to tie, like I needed to do that one thing a day thing that they say when you're recovering from meltdown, like you start with one step at a time, one thing a day. So I made that my morning thing with my dad, which is like, at least at the end of the day, like I know I've done my one thing a day, even if the rest of the day I'm sitting in anxiety and freaking out. But yeah.
I have like other questions, but we also have lots of people asking lots of
Yes,
questions
yes,
in the
yes,
comment
yes.
section.
We should head there.
I have Bhumika Anjappa, and her question is, after listening to you read chapter 6, I see that you were talking about a lot of emotional and serious things, but you were able to not make it sound so in your writing. How were you able to do it? And her second question
I'm a
is,
fan of Bill Lawrence. I feel if you are a fan of Bill Lawrence, the creator of Scrubs, and if you've, for the lack of a better word, licked his filmography, then you will have it's a very easy voice and empathy to find to do that. Yeah.
she also has another question where she wants to know how much you relate to Nikunj from your story.
I relate to everybody on this. I relate to Famida because I make content. I relate to this thing, the mom Ilaben in there because I had my own cooking scene at one point, like not professionally, but just the that itch to experiment that they have, right? Let's do freaky shit like in there. So like, if I can't like if I don't have a piece of me in any of my characters, it doesn't work for me. I can't write that. Then I can't have those jokes, right? The ones that we are talking about, where you're at this, you're giving it out, but at the same point you know that it's a hug. So to frame it that way, it wouldn't come otherwise. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have other questions? Do people want to no? Okay, please like type down your questions for Jugal in the chat box if you have any questions, and we will take them.
Maybe I can read out something while people decide if they have questions or not.
Yes, please. Maybe the parts of chapter 8 that you had.
No, I had quite a few, so I was just looking at which one would work better. Should we do the Three Ladies of Magic? Or should we do this one is just money. Let's see. This is a plot point. This is actually I'll do the Three Ladies of Magic. It's more fun. Finally, Shardaben's elder sister found the time and arrived from Ahmedabad to help Kalpesh Bhai. Hansaben looked exactly like Shardaben. She wore the same pastel saris, the same round bindi, except she was bigger in every other sense. She was literally Shardaben's big sister. Hansaben wore her hair in a bun, whereas Shardaben wore it in a single plait. Outside of the differences in their size and hairstyle, they looked exactly like their Gujarati matryoshka dolls. Hansaben carried theplas for all the households that were now a part of the larger culinary empire family. Ilaben's family, Toral Bhabhi's family, and of course Shardaben's. In the car on their way to Kalpesh Bhai's, Hansaben opened another steel dabba of theplas and a small bottle of athanu, that is pickle. She put a few on the lid and passed the lid to the driver and Nikunj in front, asking them to have some. Both declined. The driver smiled and told Nikunj that Kalpesh Bhai's grandmother behaved exactly like this whenever she arrived from their town in Gujarat. To Hansaben, it was obvious to bring theplas if you were taking a long ride from Mulund all the way to Juhu. According to her, you can reach Ahmedabad in that much time. There might have been a little truth to her claim. Hansaben asked Nikunj about Kalpesh Bhai's illness. He told her everything that he knew, and then she asked him about his motions problem. Once again, he told her everything he knew. When Hansaben, Shardaben, and Nikunj reached the Sheth house, Hansaben wasn't at all awestruck by the magnificence and the whiteness of the house. Shardaben kept flexing her core muscles and checking out various nooks and corners of the house to find one dirty spot. Hansaben spotted Kalpesh Bhai's father watching the news in front of the television and offered him some theplas, saying, "These are straight from Ahmedabad." "Then I must take one." He loved it so much he took away the entire dabba and asked the servant to get plates and serve the theplas to everyone. Satisfied, Hansaben, Shardaben, and Nikunj had tea with Kalpesh Bhai's father. Kalpesh Bhai, and Kashmira Bhabi. To show respect to Ahmedabad's finest, the Sheth kitchen served their own claim to fame. Thalipit and dahi sambarni chutney with ginger mint lemongrass cardamom tea. Hansaben spoke about how Jhadpuk had been happening in their family for generations. She spoke of their aunt Chotiben who got possessed by Mataji every Navratri, and of their grandmother who had once ridden an entire village of evil spirits which harassed the villagers after a tantric spell blew up under a peepal tree. Once the tea was had and the stories petered to a stop, in the awkward silence, Kashmira Bhabi asked, "Shall we begin then?" "Yes, yes, of course. Have you kept everything ready?" "Yes. Come with us to our rooms." Nikunj wheeled Kalpesh Bhai to their bedroom. Kashmira Bhabi went to the kitchen and got the thali with everything that Hansaben had asked for: cumin seeds, salt, red chilies, mustard seeds, a steel lota, and a piece of red cloth. Hansaben asked for a tawa to be put on the gas and preheated while they performed the first part of the ritual. She filled the lota with water and dropped a nimbu in the water. Then she tied the lota with the red cloth and did Kalpesh Bhai's aarti with it. She asked Kashmira Bhabi which was the east corner of the room and put the lota in that corner. Then she took all the masala and held it in a fist over Kalpesh Bhai's head. She closed her eyes and said some words. After she was done, she walked straight to the kitchen and put the masala on the hot tawa. It sizzled and there was a lot of smoke. But the smoke smelled like someone had sprayed the house with air freshener as opposed to making everyone gag and cough. Nobody understood what happened, but it gave Shardaben and Hansaben goosebumps. They leaned into each other and muttered something in Gujarati that nobody else understood. Nobody else understood is important because everybody here is Gujarati. Then Hansaben darted to the east corner and opened the lota to check on the nimbu. It had turned into a shining silver nimbu. The one possessing Kalpesh Bhai is not a ghost or an evil spirit, it's a Divya Shakti. I don't think I am pious enough for this ritual. I'll have to call my Masi from Ahmedabad. Hansaben and Shardaben's maternal aunt Choti Ben was perhaps the most badass matriarch and in the mystical and half medical circles in the Gujarati community of Mumbai and Gujarat. Choti Ben was famous for being possessed by Mataji every Navratri, where in a trance she would reveal truths and make predictions. Where whatever she said while in the trance had always come true. Every Navratri, their entire extended family visited her to have at least one bhog meal with her. They got a sense of direction about wherever they needed to go. Vipul Bhai and Ilaben had been planning to take Nikita and Nikunj to Choti Ben ever since the business partnership between Ilaben and Shardaben had evolved into a sambandh. And then you go into what happens when Choti Ben's here. So, yeah.
Thank you. I had another question. I was very curious about Nikita and Nikunj's relationship because, and I wondered whether, do you have a sibling? And
Yeah, I have a younger brother.
You have a younger brother.
Yeah.
Because I was reading a lot of the chapters focus on them sharing their stories at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And it's like a very recent kind of intimacy that they shared. Before that, they never really cared about each other. And then suddenly, once they both have jobs and are contributing to the family,
it's that first rupture, right? The crisis in the family, the first one when stability was shaken in a proper way. Then everything had to unfold from there. So they needed to find that thread between each other at that point. So yeah, that's where that bonding comes from. I have a lot of like I mentioned my close cousin, some of my like deeply dear friends, like closest friends have been women friends over some time. I like one of my closest friends and I were like was staying literally in each other's pockets for like about 7 to 10 years at some point. So yeah, like a whole bunch of this, all of this came into play with like these two finding their bonding and finding their rhythm with each other.
Thank you, Jugal, for answering all my questions so very patiently and elaborately.
Thank you.
We have other questions. If you have questions, you can leave them in the chat box.
I don't think so. There are any. And yay.
Yeah, if we don't have any questions, we will slowly wrap this conversation up. We're so very glad that you were able to join us. And when they initially told me that I would get a chance to talk to you, I actually assumed for a good 1 week that you were going to come here in person and be with us.
I know. I was also thinking that when he messaged me.
And then like 2 days ago, I realized it was like a Zoom conversation, but
Yeah.
it's so very nice to see your face and
Thank you.
hear you talk. And
Thank you so much.
I
It's been
also
a
very much
pleasure and an honor.
enjoyed the romance between you and Arul sir in the first 5 minutes.
It's the best kind.
It is. Thank you, Jugal, for joining us.
Okay. Thank you.
See you sometime soon.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.